I'm Gail Davis, Provost at Grand Valley, and I am really pleased to see you all here for this, our third of 4 lectures in the 50th at Noon lecture series. This is a series about Grand Valley's evolution from the little alternative, not very well-known institution to the premier comprehensive university in the Midwest that it is today. Our planning committee has done a great job of putting this series together, as so many other aspects of our 50th anniversary have been wonderful, and I want to thank them. So thank you, planning committee, appreciate it. The anniversary committee asked people to present their lecture, whatever topic they were talking about, from their own personal history with Grand Valley. So if you haven't been able to come to these yet before today, for all of them, except for one that is today, we scheduled pairs of people to come and talk about their experiences. For instance, Don Lubbers and Glenn Niemeyer were here. They talked about the college in the cornfield. Joan Bond and Jim Scott discussed the inception and growth of physical education and intercollegiate athletics at Grand Valley. And for our last lecture that will be held on March 30th, Ron Van Steelen, Vice President for Finance and Administration Emeritus, and Vern Ullman, one of our often used architects here and designers here for our buildings, will present this title, Incorporating the Village Experience into Grand Valley's Campus Design. So that's coming up. One more to go after today. But today is different. The committee could think of no reason to pair anyone with today's speaker.
Oh, yeah.
She is standing in a corner. I'm not sure what we're up for. She herself and her experience at Grand Valley as history unfolded are so completely unique. She not only knows all the skeletons, she also knows where they're buried, why they were buried, and what they were wearing when they were buried. Lynn Chick Blue started working at Grand Valley in 1968. She has served the university in a whole variety of roles, the longest one as registrar for 30 years. Chick is currently the Vice Provost and Dean of Academic Services and Information Technology. As she took on each of these successively more and more responsible and crucial roles, Chick increasingly became the person with not only the general institutional history, but also the fine details of our operations throughout the years and throughout all of the academic services complex of responsibilities. As my vice provost for the past 5 years, I have seen how she never shirks an opportunity to make us better, particularly our students. She brings the integrated knowledge of our culture and history as well as our practices in her work, resulting in creative and wise decisions. She has not gotten tired of any of this, at least not most days. I know Chick to be both practical and idealistic, down to earth and humorous, but also a fighter for her beliefs. Dedicated, loyal, student-centered, and solution-oriented. And although Chick is completely and fiercely devoted to this university, she is not blindly so. She can spot its weaknesses, and she's not shy about voicing her concerns about them, nor is she hesitant about finding a way to strengthen Grand Valley. So I would not be surprised if today what we hear are some humorous anecdotes mixed in with informed and serious reflections about where we've been as a university and where we're headed. I know this is going to be a huge treat. Please join me in welcoming our colleague and dear friend, Lynn Chick Blue, to the podium.
That was so sweet.
Yeah, good woman.
This is really nerve-making, I hope you understand.
But I'm going to get on a roll here, and I brought some things that afterwards you may want to come and look at. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time in the current decade, maybe not even in the last decade, but I thought I'd start by saying I learned a lot of stuff from my mom. One of the things I learned from her when I was a Girl Scout and trying to run my first Girl Scout meeting, and I was complaining to her that the other girls wouldn't listen. And she said, well, chick, this is what I do. If you want the kids to listen, have candy. If you want them to be quiet and listen, make it taffy. So, we have some taffy to come around, okay? Okay. That was my first lesson in management from my mother. Now, this is titled GVSU, A Tradition of Change. I've been at Grand Valley for 43 years, and that is really an awfully long time, and I was young once and enjoyed this place when I was a youngster and a middle-aged kid and now an old kid. But one of the things that is so true of Grand Valley is a year didn't go by without some fairly significant change. And the changes all got represented in these things called catalogs, right? This is my life. My job from pretty much the first day I got here, and that would be this catalog, was to know this and understand this and make it work. So my whole life is just mired in all this detail that's piled up here on this table. I'm going to start with a few old snaps. I did some research to find some pictures to use, and I found some really great old ones that maybe you guys haven't seen before. This was the first sign on Grand Valley's Allendale campus. There was a pink farmhouse and a gray farmhouse at the time, and a barn. And there was the nice new sign. I'm sure there are none of you here that bought a brick to build Grand Valley, but we did sell bricks to build Grand Valley. This was when the president and a few employees, because there weren't many at the time, moved from Grand Rapids out to the Allendale campus and into the gray farmhouse. And you'll notice, I don't know how many of you remember the bucket chairs. They were big and orange. You see what's right there in front? We kept them for a very long time. We were very frugal in those days. McDonald's didn't start the arches, we did. Now there's a look. That's Lake Michigan Hall. And this is Lake Superior in this pile right here. And this is as we got a little closer. This was the first new student orientation. Orientation people, what do you think? Hootenanny? Isn't that sweet? And there's the barn. Okay? This was opening day for the first class. Now, one of the things I want to point out to you right away, and maybe it's to give credit to admissions people around the world. Can you imagine recruiting for the class to start in 1963? You didn't have a college. You didn't have a campus. Well, you did. You had a campus. You were out there going to high schools visiting, and you had this catalog. This catalog has 35 pages, including the back cover. We were a simpler college then. This talked all about what was going to happen. So kudos to admissions people years ago that they managed to find 226 students that would enroll that first day in buildings that weren't quite done. As a matter of fact, the day classes started, those buildings weren't quite done. And the library was still in the pink farmhouse. This is Lake Michigan Hall, looking at Seidman House being built. Now, check that out, beanies. We had those then. Some of this is going to be about Ozzie and Harriet days. And mind you, I plan to spend the majority of my time back in yesteryear rather than current year. We were building a bridge then. And this is the first thing that I have that I actually would read to you. I found a booklet, which I'll turn over to the archives because I'm not sure that they actually have one, but it's How to Afford and Pay for Grand Valley State College. In here, I found some messages that shape our culture today, and I'll read it. This is, what are other responsibilities of employees? Share work. Through each position carries with it specific responsibilities. Employees are expected to share work, which is the principal responsibility of others, according to priorities established by your supervisor. The holder of each position also has a responsibility to be an informed and informative representative of the college, ready always to answer questions about the college and to interest people in its accomplishments. And lastly, standards of excellence, which are the objectives of the academic program for students. By each letter written, by each personal or telephone contact made, and by each task an employee undertakes for the college, its quality may be judged critically by some observer of its development. Earning the admiration of both students and the general public for this newest of Michigan State College is a function of every position on staff. 1963, passed by Board of Control. Isn't that interesting? And it hangs with us today. Okay. As I said, this was our first catalog. It's all talking about what will happen because they were out recruiting before it had happened. It had courses in there numbered Math 1 and Math 2 and Math 3. I think there were 12 courses that were offered that first year. You've heard people joke about cornfield. Now notice, that's the field house, and you see what's there? This was a cornfield, seriously. There it is, the doomed dome. You'll see another shot of it later on. Now, it's too bad Lee isn't here. This is the crowd that gathered to watch the building of the library. That's the library, Zumberg, right there in the background. I'm sure the same thing will happen as we start digging out here. This is, many of you probably don't know, but this is Whiteout Hall. The thing there in the front is the climatron. I think that it was about the ugliest thing that we had on our campus. All it would get was full sun. So things that grew in there were cacti. And you'd walk by it and you'd go, aren't you longing for something green and leafy? And it just never had any. So, yeah. And that Whiteout Hall, Doug, maybe that was Cortem metal, is that right? That was designed to oxidize. And it looked like a rusty building from the get-go. And it really looked like you ought to get the scouring powder out and go take care of it. Okay, now to give you just a sense of what it was like in Ozzie and Harriet days, this is a report by the Dean of Students at the time. He got a note from a fellow in the library to say, I threw the undernamed students out of the library on Tuesday morning for playing cards and talking in the carols. I told them that they would have to see you before Wednesday night and tell you why they had so much free time that they could play cards in a $400,000 facility instead of studying. I am not making this one up. So, Dean Stamatakis met with these students, and the first student said right away, immediately, fessed up to inappropriate behavior, and no, they should not have been playing cards. And Amber, the next one, right away said that it was totally inappropriate, it wasn't the right thing to be doing. David said, well, you know, I heard them over there, so I just went over to see what was going on. I wasn't playing cards at all. Kathy said, I am so sorry, please don't tell my mother, blah, 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 blah. So they did tell all the parents, of course, because that's what you did then. You told the parents. Along came Marion, and you'll have to hear this one. This young lady stated that she was just playing cards. We weren't disturbing anyone. She further stated that if there was a rule against playing cards in the library, the school should post a notice to that effect in the library. No amount of discussion to get through to this young lady that playing cards in the library was not at all appropriate or acceptable in a collegiate society. She seemed completely unable to accept or understand accepted standards of decorum and propriety. The Dean of Student Services could not help but feel that this girl needed a great deal of personalized attention, counseling, and direction before she would be able to take her rightful place in society. Isn't that one great? I pull that one out every once in a while when Bart Merkel is talking about a problem he has with a kid and think, there were simpler days. And one more to get the Ozzie and Harriet out of it. I, Carol Wilcox, acknowledge involvement in the violation of the rules and regs of the college on October 6th. I was found to have a male guest in my apartment in Muskegon House of the Grand Valley Apartments. Realizing college attendance to be a privilege and the reasonable behavior to be an important criterion for continued college attendance, I agree to act in an appropriate manner for the remainder of the 65-66 academic year. She was restricted to her room and needed to check in after classes and could not leave her room after 6 p.m. for 3 months. Things change. Okay, this is my first book of details. I was carrying you through yesteryear, but that's my first book of rules, and we had gone from the 35 pages almost to 100 pages of rules by that time. Details. Now, I want to tell you, it's basically all about the details. And can't find a cursor. There it is. Everything is important to know everything, calculate it properly, be able to pick things precisely, be certain of every detail. It could kill you. This was my Grand Valley when I started here. You'll notice we have the Lakes buildings and we have a library. We had Mackinac and Manitou, and we had a couple of dorms, and we had the Doomed Dome and Loudet, the Rusty building. This was my typewriter. I was a brand new position at Grand Valley, so I got a new desk, a new typewriter, everything. I still have the manual for this, if anybody wants to do it. It was really great. It had a buoyant keyboard, which meant you didn't have to pound on the keys like you did with old typewriters. This is to remind us of our frugality. When I started here, you know, ID cards are always a big deal with students. They're always kind of a pain in the neck to administer. But when I started here, we didn't have an ID camera. We were poor. I mean, like really poor. We borrowed Grand Rapids Community College's Polaroid camera. So they would start classes, and then 2 weeks into the term, we would go down and pick up their camera and bring it out to campus, and we would call all the students to come to the GT room. You guys know that Grand Traverse room? That's up there where accounting is right now. That used to be where the lunchroom was and everything. And so the people would come there and we would take their pictures. And the returning students would come and this was printed on the back of the ID cards. I can't find mine, but it says, present this and be punched by the registrar. It's just one of those things that we did in the olden days, is be punched by the registrar. Actually, after using their camera for 5 years, they were able to buy a new one, and they sold us theirs for $50, which we then used for the next 5 years. This was our study carrels. You see the nice typewriter and the monitor there? We can credit Casey Bossman for these high-tech things. I hope you're taking special note of the suit jacket. This was a dorm room. You see the nice tape recorder up there on the shelf? In the early days, we didn't have police, and so we armed the executive officers. We had them wander the campus, keep the hippies in order. Don didn't holster his, he liked to carry his. And you notice how he smiles so nicely. Well, soon enough, we got a police car. Isn't that a beaut? Don't you just picture Barney Fife hopping into that puppy? And we got a boat. We didn't have a camera, but we had a boat. We had the Angus. We kept that over in Grand Haven. Then we got this other boat. I think you'll see Mary Seeger standing right over there. Mary Seeger has always been the queen of rowing. The fellow in the front with the nose is Don Dufek. You could always tell Don Dufek from a pretty fair distance. That's me at Fieldhouse registration. Pretty nice hairdo, don't you think? The glasses were really big. I don't have them. Okay, now what's going on here? Oh, you know what? I turned the dang thing off. This is seamless, right, Joe? Joe told me to try not to be seamless. And right here, let me see if I can get the pointer. Right there, that's me, right there. That's when short skirts were in style once before. And this is Fieldhouse registration. And what we used to do, and remember, we were on quarters then, so you got to do this many, many times a year. You'd pack up everything you own, and pencils and papers and books and all this crap. And you'd haul it over to the field house, and you'd put it out on all the tables, and then everybody would have to come. And they had to come at certain hours, by like 15-minute blocks. And if they didn't, you didn't let them in the door, because you didn't want them to steal any registration or anything. This was our first processing machine. This was pre the computer. Isn't he a dandy? That was in the basement of Lake Michigan Hall. We would go over there to the field house and we'd figure out what everybody was taking. Then we'd have to go over to Lake Michigan Hall, go down the basement, go to the key punch machine and punch it all in and put the cards in it and then feed them into that puppy, and out would pop a printed schedule. Now, I don't know why we did that, because you could have just written it, but we needed to do that. And by the way, I do have the manual for that machine here, in case anybody's interested in the details. It also tells you in here how to wire the boards, because there were boards in there that you connected to make things work. Right, Terry? Okay. Key punch machines. That was a pretty new one. Now we're getting into some really interesting times. When I started in '68, it was the first semester of Thomas Jefferson College. Many of you have heard that before, I'm sure. We then started adding colleges and institutes until we had quite a collection of them. This was a catalog along about '74, and you can see that we had a bit of a split personality. Not sure who we were, but we were a pile of colleges at the time. About this same time, we got our first computer. I've highlighted the area. It's a great good thing. It's 32K. And over the next 7 years, we hope to build up to 64K. Now, those of you who have little MP3 players, that's about a tenth of a song. So this had a lot of power. That was my next typewriter, the Selectric. The next few years were all about not enough space. Always cozy. This was the records office. See how spacious it is? And you notice the paper. Everything was paper. We didn't have computers yet. We didn't even have the good old Heath Kit yet. We also had parties. We had them after grading at Christmas time. And I made the meanest champagne punch on the planet. A lot of people would join in. That's how we got to have champagne punch, because of the people that came to the party. That thing behind them there, that's the Diebold. That is like a big Ferris wheel of record cards, and that's where we stored all of our records. There's the dome. It fell down. It fell down the night before we were supposed to set up for registration in the field house. Another minor detail. Oh, what to do? So you pack everything up and you go where? Oh, maybe the Kirchhoff Center. So we'll take over the Kirchhoff Center. Yeah, so that brought a lot of other things. Where do you hold the classes? What about your basketball games? Ooh, because we didn't fix this right away quick a minute. This took a while. So absent a field house, we sent everybody outside for all their activities. We don't have this anymore, but there used to be a ski hill out there with a tow rope. I see some people nodding that might have been there. There were interesting elections. This was definitely the hippie era. Somebody who was looking at this early said, "Y'all look like hippies." Well, yeah. This was the staging of a photograph that would become a recruitment brochure, Jody. Pretty good, huh? Yeah. We had a kind of a mixed face back in the day. Then there was the National Poetry Festival. We entertained that several times during that period, and it brought quite a collection of people to campus. Clown class. Who remembers clown class? Anybody? Anybody? Great, I can tell every lie I know. Performing Arts Center and Thomas Jefferson College celebrated a lot of things in the arts. And one of the things that they had every summer, for several summers, was clown class. So you'd walk in from the parking lot, we were at the time in like Huron Hall, and you'd come traipsing and come around the corner of Seidman House and hanging from a tree as a mime. and then you'd see some others bouncing balls around, you know, and all the while the admissions office was right next door and entertaining prospective students. It's that face that we put forward that was difficult at the time. William James College, came along in that time. College 4, and the module mobile, for the convenience of taking coursework directly to the factory and the workplace. Right, Doug? Yeah. I was going to check and see if we still had that. Maybe Moyer could set it up for us since we're low on classrooms. We could use, because this was set up as a classroom, by the way. College 4 had something pretty unique. They had half-credit modules. This was our tuition chart. So you could come up to the window in records and say, "I'd like to buy me 5 half credits of math." You bet. If you're College 4, but if you're CAS, you can't, because you have to buy in whole multiples. only college 4 people could buy in halves. Any of you seen this stationery before with a nice leaf in the middle? I'm sure Glenn is ever so proud to have his name on a piece of that. We had jazz and blues festivals. This is, there's Zumberg back there. Every summer we'd have one of these. Don wouldn't be at work then. I think there was a great deal of pressure on people to maybe not have so many of them. Then there was the blizzard of '78. Actually, this was the blizzard of '78. That was Labrador. This is the Kirchhoff. Little story about that blizzard. We didn't close school. Some crazy people drove to campus. And since I didn't want to be alone, this young woman who worked for me named Joan Smith got to have a ride with me out to work so that I wouldn't be by myself. So long about maybe 11 o'clock, and the snow was getting more intense and more intense and more intense. Somebody called from the Kirchhoff Center to say, yeah, the college is closing. We want you all to come over to the Kirchhoff where we'll have cots. This was my 30th birthday. No way, Jose. Not on your life. So, to be mindful, because it was my boss actually that called, we did report over the Kirchhoff, but not without being totally scared to death. We walked out of the north side of Lake Huron Hall. Au was there by the time. We got about halfway from Lake Huron and Au and we could see neither. It was terrifying. There were 3 of us. We grabbed hands and we started walking, like the 3 of us together. And then we stopped all at once and thought, where's the pond? We knew it was between us and the Kirchhoff Center. We did actually make it over there. It took us 20 minutes to get there. It was terrifying. It was what people say a whiteout. It was totally that. Unbelievable. Well, as I said, it was my 30th birthday, and I had some other plans. And they weren't in Allendale. They were in Grand Rapids. So my friend Joan and I decided that we would go to Grand Rapids. My car was over in Lake Michigan's parking lot, so Joan and I made our way over to Lake Michigan parking lot. It was my car, so I was driving. I had Joan walk alongside the car, holding on to the rear mirror, guiding my way down Campus Drive, and walked all the way over to Lake Michigan Drive. It was crystal clear. So we drove into town and had our birthday party. Joan continued to be a friend, though she never rode to work with me ever again. She was a good sport, though. We were younger, because see, you could do it when you were younger. Okay, so we're going to leave some of the levity behind on the 70s. In the forum at the time was posted this note that the state auditors were going to be on campus, and that was pretty customary. They would come to campus to audit everything that you got, you know, all your credits, all your grades, all of this, all of that. And so he was acknowledging that the auditors were going to be there to do the 74-75, 75-76 year. And that was so that y'all would behave, right? Okay, well, on this Monday morning, when they were to come over to records, we were in Lake Huron at the time. In Lake Huron, upstairs, the center core of it was the records office. On either flank, men's room, women's room, and the doors opened on both sides. So basically a circle. On the northeast corner of that building, it was wide open, space probably about this big. Thomas Jefferson held their common meeting there every Monday. And when you would come in on common meeting day, you'd open that door to walk into Lake Huron Hall and you'd go, what's that smell? Oh, Jefferson is holding their common meeting. Some people were fairly open about what they smoked then, and during common meeting, I think just crowd caused other people to join in. Well, that Monday morning, guess who else walked in that door? 2 state auditors. So they had to come upstairs. We lived right up there by the common room. And this one auditor, this was his 3rd or 4th time at Grand Valley, and he was the meanest, crankiest man on the face of the earth. I don't think his lips smile. So here he comes walking down. What's that smell? I said, well, the air handlers aren't working very well in the building today. What are you going to say? Oh, well, it's grass. He wants some, So I'm trying to hurry up a minute and get this guy and his smiling pal, because he liked my answer, into a room so that they could sit down and start auditing. And the crabby guy wanted to stay and talk some more about, well, what was going on over there and what is all that noise going on? And I mean, that sentence is out of his mouth, and here comes a conga line through the men's restroom of every TJC kid, and they're hopping and jumping and carrying on. They've got flowers and, oh my Lord, my Lord, my Lord. And so here's this auditor. What's that? It's a group of students. I understand that. What program are they in? Thomas Jefferson. Well, that was a fateful day because that audit turned out to be pretty brutal, actually, because they did break into the coursework. At the time, we were so eager to be unique that we uniqued ourselves right into a hole. We had scheduled booklets that had floating seminars in them. What's a floating seminar, the auditor would ask. And what's a pear orchard project? And what's clown class? And you get credit for that? So it really opened up some issues. It wasn't as though Jefferson was nothing. I mean, we produced some absolutely fabulous students out of Jefferson, and they went to absolutely fabulous law schools and professional schools and graduate schools. Now, that wasn't without an awful lot of help writing letters to explain their transcripts. The average Thomas Jefferson person had a 15 to 50 page transcript. The longest is 136 pages because they had narrative transcripts. Now, I don't know if you know anything about law school data assembly services, but they like A's and B's and credits. They don't really like stories. This, you can't see it in its entirety, but this was my summation to a task force on common grading and numbering. We had 21 grading symbols. That's 21, right? A, B, C, D, E takes care of 5 of them. We had a bunch more. Every institute, every college had a grading scale. When you were in one college and you took a course in another college, you had yet another way of applying the grading scale. We didn't have computers to do this then, kids. We did this by hand. Everybody had a set that they used, and then every college, in order to show their individuality, had their own transcript too. So we had what was known as the all-college card, which was the one that the auditors would accept and LSDAS would accept. and graduate schools would accept. And then we had the Thomas Jefferson card and the Willie J card. Kirchhoff, or College 4, was a computerized puppy, except when you were from another one of the colleges, and then that was a paper copy. So we were really pretty complex in the day. And it was all about differences at the time. It felt like, if you were in the records office, it kind of felt like, okay, I'm a new college, so what kind of grades would I like to use? You know, A is all taken. So, how about M? Yes, M, mastery. Yes, how about that? And then, not to be outdone, because A was taken, Kirchhoff and I think Performing Arts Center decided to have A asterisk instead of A. We had a grade called U for unsatisfactory. That went into disuse after a couple of years because we didn't want to damage the children's psyche by showing things that weren't completed satisfactorily. Now you can understand why the auditors preferred to look at the all-college card as opposed to the individual transcripts, because they really were a little fictional. At the time, things were very, very complex. Each college had its own registration system. Each college had its own records office. Each college had its own advisors. The central records office was always the place to place as much blame as you could for not having the correct record. Well, when you had 6 records offices, it was pretty much a crapshoot as to which records office was the right records office. And the registration system, so if you wanted to take something over there, because the whole idea was you could take things from across the campus, but you couldn't register for them. That was the big problem. Do you people know what the Lantoon is? It's the April 1st edition of the Lanthorn. Okay, well, this is a little clip from there. The Lanthorn got it right. Director of Records, Lynn Chuck Brezhnev. I was controlling then, too. Announced today that a new registration procedure combining all of the colleges would be instituted next year. Students have enough difficulty deciding whether to or go blind, let alone picking out classes that don't conflict, Brezhnev explained. The simplified registration procedure will require students to list the numbers of credits they want to take and the hours they're available for class. This information will be fed into the Deluxe Ronco computer and Vegomatic, which will assign classes compatible with the student's schedule and then spit it out all over the floor. The Vice President for Academic and Extramarital Affairs, Gland Kniebender, sees the new system as a boon to the harried college student. It's not only simple, but it's also perfectly compatible with the idea of a liberal arts education. It was really confusing, folks. I see Pat Haynes nodding her head back here. She's one who would remember it, having worked in Jefferson's office, right? And then Kirchhoff. Did you go over to Kirchhoff? No. You did? Yeah, okay. All right. And this really led to kind of a 1, 2, 3 punch in a kind of a serious way. We were first accredited in 1968 by North Central. We had a reaccreditation visit in 1978, as was customary if you got the 10-year thing. they wrote back to us that we had some problems, and they thought there might be 3 of them. The NCA regulators feel that the colleges are hurt by a number of factors. One is too many academic and administrative units. Another is individual colleges functioning too independently of each other. And a third factor is the competition between colleges, institutes for students, money, and resources. These factors combine to hinder communication between the individual academic units and administrative offices. Having worked then, it was a lot of fun, and there were a lot of laughs, and we did laugh. But one thing that did happen, and happened increasingly as the 70s wore along, first, we were losing enrollment. We were focused internally on what we do and how we do it and our own uniquenesses, and not so very focused externally. Many of the administrative people, not at the executive level, but records office level, financial aids office level, were pitted against one another for these scarce resources. So much so that there was really incivility, that how dare you say that we ought to do this because we should really do it this way because it's unique to our school. One that is so telling came out of Jefferson. There was a woman who worked in the records office there at the tail end of Jefferson who would routinely send memos to the records office or the financial aids office, and she had a unique rubber stamp. You know how you can make a gesture with your hand and one finger stands up? That was her rubber stamp. And she would place that upon communiques to the central records office. Okay, so this was a dam getting ready to burst, right? Because we were spending all of our time focusing on ourselves instead of getting students. When you'd go to a recruitment event, you had no idea what face you would see. Keep on trucking? Or would you see a faculty member from College of Arts and Sciences? Our face out in the community, nobody understood us, because what would be in the newspaper would be the conga line through the men's restroom, or clown class or something like that. So ultimately, it ended up that we were going to do some common numbering, common grading, and eventually the collapse of all of the colleges and into the what is known as the divisions. Now, as I say, we were really struggling with enrollment, and some people in what is now institutional marketing, though the ones that are here were not there then, came up with a brilliant idea of the feather letter. You can see what a handsome feather that is. We sent this letter to everybody who had attended Grand Valley and had not yet graduated, and it says, "We're not sure, Mr. Bliss, whether this feather fell off a bird or just out of someone's hat, but it reminds us that the birds of spring will soon be back on campus at Grand Valley." It was a hit, I can tell you. Do you want to borrow that, Rhonda? Now, you'll see my name down there and my colleague, Bob Dowd. We had refused to sign it. You can see that that didn't last very long. We still got to sign it. We didn't live that one down. It was along about that time that we started having TGIFs. We called them First Fridays. Maybe I shouldn't tell it, but it's a great story. We hired along about that time a guy in human resources, not Scott, who had a law degree. And sometimes we like to pick on him because sometimes he would get under your skin. So he was part of our First Friday meetings. It was always held at the Shawmut. He drove a car that's about the size of one of these buses that Greta runs out here. Well, one time we decided to get him, and we bought numbers that go on a boat, and we glued them to the side of his car. Those were the fun things that we did in that year, besides the feather letter. I remember that because Bob Dowd and I were the one that affixed the numbers to his car. He doesn't know it. He still works here today. I think he knows now that I did it. Okay, we went to common numbers and common grading. We got rid of many of our grades. We ended up with the A through F, the credit and the no credit. And we went to semesters. All of this other stuff that we did was when we were in quarter systems, so you did it again and again and again. The semester system allowed a little more break. Here was the how you figured it all. Again, at this time we didn't have a whole lot of computing power. Rather, it would add up stuff, but then you'd have to add it to all the students' records. Then we converted, and we sent everybody a note. And this was the great Grand Valley Credit Hour giveaway. We've never had one since, but the rule was when you did the math, if it was a fraction, you rounded up to the next hour. So there are people out there who graduated with fewer than 120 if you really added them. John Klein was probably one. And that figures, right, John? Okay, long about then, we got a new field house. And I point this out for Andrew's purposes. You see that arrow way over there? That's where our water tower used to be. Andrew has kept moving it closer and closer to campus. It's amazing how that works. These are bleachers. Everybody was pretty excited to get a field house because we've been sending our classes here and there and down in Allendale and everywhere else to have phys ed and the ski hill. Long comes fall of '83, and we start, here we are going downtown. We're going to be a big college now. And the Heath Kit. Everybody, 2 decades, the Heath Kit. This is a Casey Bossman frugal approach to Grand Valley no budgets. We bought these Heath Kits, they put them together. We used these things. This puppy is so bruised here from the number of times that it was put in a truck with 9 of them on top to go over to the field house or somewhere to go to registration. So everybody would come up and we'd punch them in. It was really great stuff then, because that was like really looking like computer. Another frugal thing that we did, we changed our name a lot. We were a college, we were colleges, we were college, we were university. So every time we did that, we had to fix stuff. So unfortunately, we had a few diplomas on hand when we went from a C to a U. We didn't have the money to buy more diploma covers, but we did have enough money to buy stickers. So, remember these, Mary? We glued these on diplomas. There were some glued like this, and there were some glued like that. There weren't any totally upside down ones, though. Seidman House, where admissions and records and financial aids lived for a while. Again, space, cozy. This guy. If you look in our archives, you can find maybe 10 or 15 of these. He used to routinely go on a little trip around campus. as a handicapped student. Probably one of the most hysterical ones, and only one time did he do it. We had a very steep ramp that went down to the basement of Seidman, where the records office was. Don came careening down that ramp, only to be stopped by the cement wall at the end of it. Ka-whack! He couldn't open the door. Once he got the door open, he had it braced with his feet, and he rolled out backwards. And then, maybe it wasn't his most polite voice, he asked for assistance to get back. But very soon, there was some work done on that ramp so that people could actually get to that stupid records office. The records office was down there. It was flooded 3 times, by the way. The first time it was flooded, the maintenance guy was tired of picking leaves out of the drain at the base of the ramp, so he put a screen over the drain so that just the water could run through. Well, then the leaves laid on the screen and became an awful lot like a plug and filled up the Seidman house. That was the lowest point on campus, and so when it would rain, it would all run down the sidewalk and straight down the ravine, right into the ramp and into records. We did that 3 times. We were once flooded in Lake Huron Hall. That was upstairs, but that was by the skylights, not by the water coming from below. It came from above. We jumped into technology with a bang and got telephone registration. 895-5010, you guys remember it, don't you? Yeah. So what we did was we took a whole bunch of telephones over to the field house, right? Because you'd go to the field house to register. You wouldn't use your phone from home. Goodness, no. So we brought a bunch of phones over. I can remember this one time when there were a group of guys, and I don't know if it was these guys that are in the picture, but they were, I don't mean to denigrate or anything, but they were athletes, and they were going to test the first usage of touch tone. And at the time, like we do now, if classes are closed or you needed something, there was always a paper permit. So I was in charge of watching the phones that day, and here were 5 of these guys who each had a paper permit to get in a class, and they had the phone here, and they're holding their permit and trying to figure out what happens with the paper. It's why Touchstone didn't work very well, because we had so many permits that you couldn't ram into the telephone. Then we built a building, not a church. We got deep in the arts. I was working on a building. One of the big things of the later years. We wanted a clock tower. We got the numbers. The tower came. We then had this big building. We're getting closer to the end of what I've got to say as we're building up to today's world. Holland. Here's another orientation. Notice orientation is the same today as it is then. We do construction in the middle of orientation. One big thing that we did, and that I'm pretty proud of, is that we have every one of our records available on a desktop in the records office. Most universities don't have that, but we committed to doing that. We had to scan better than 2 million documents to make that happen, and we did it in a year, scanned and indexed them, and all of the transcripts. And then we shredded stuff, and there were our empty files. We had enrollment games. Some of us entered them, some of us didn't, but that was when we started gaining enrollment. And I would run this pool, and people would enter it. Whoever had the worst guess had to pay. And this year, Butcher got to pay, and he made us all sign something that we wouldn't taunt him. The 90s and 2000s were spent doing that, making systems to make ourselves work in today's world. in a far easier world to work in with some automation rather than lots of paper. Now, is it the blizzard of '78 or 2011? I can tell you on the blizzard of 2011, the first time in my entire career I did not get to campus on a day that it was closed for weather. First time. So I don't know if that's because I'm now way too old or just because Ferrysburg can't plow their streets. So I end it with, it's always been an adventure. This was me hosting the Gong Show in another day. End of story.
Thank you.